Welcome to episode 2 of the Everyday Christian Podcast. Today, we are talking about gratitude.
Thanksgiving is right around the corner.
It is.
The day we feast like kings
And queens.
and queens and eat far more than we should
Yeah, for sure.
and nearly pass out.
Yep.
And then watch football.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I love Thanksgiving.
I do too.
You know what I love about Thanksgiving?
What's that?
It's not the turkey.
No?
I mean, I love the turkey, don't get me wrong.
Sure.
But it's not, to me, everybody says like the turkey's the star of the show. I love side dishes.
Yeah, me too.
They are like my ultimate favorite.
Yes.
I love side dishes.
Yes. Okay, so we're going to do something fun.
Okay.
If you had to pick one Thanksgiving side dish.
Oh, we're talking side dishes.
Yes. That you are going to have guaranteed every single year, what would it be?
Cranberry sauce.
Yes.
I mean,
there's
there's no doubt in my mind. It absolutely. Now, but here's the real debate. Here's the real debate. There's two kind of ways of doing cranberry sauce. There is the way where you take cranberries and you cook them and you do all this stuff and you doctor them up and they're kind of mushy and broken up and everything.
You're talking my language.
Right. There's that kind.
Right.
But then there's the right kind.
No.
The right kind where you take the can opener and you turn it or you
Okay.
and you take it and you do that whole
Okay.
and you drop it onto the plate and then you slice it.
Okay.
And it has like the little ridges from the can on it.
And you're sure that's the right way?
That is the right way.
Oh, you're hurting my heart.
Well, I mean, like I forget the passage of scripture, but it's in there.
You forget it?
I do,
Will
like off
you
the top
bring
of my
that
head.
to us next time?
I-
Okay.
So
You need a drink? Oh, what a good time to take a drink.
yeah,
All right.
So moving on, we don't want the
Moving
podcast to
on.
get too long.
All right.
Yeah.
If you can eliminate one side dish from all Thanksgivings from here on out, what would it be?
I think I know what you're gonna say.
Yeah. You know what I'm going to
I don't know because I think by now you probably, like Christy, just FYI, makes an amazing Thanksgiving dinner.
Thanks.
It's incredible.
Well, last year wasn't, but this year is
But
gonna be.
usually, and you make all the stuff that I like. I would say that one that do people like if people have Brussels sprouts, I could do without that. Like eliminate that forever.
I wasn't raised on Brussels sprouts.
No
so
one
that's not
ever-
a thing that we
No one needs to eat those.
Nope.
If you like Brussels sprouts,
Sorry.
yeah, I mean you can turn the podcast off, I guess.
Don't turn us off.
There are other good things we'll talk about, but
Okay.
I guess maybe if that's a thing, but like green bean casserole, I love the sweet potato casserole you make. I think it's got some sweet potatoes in it, and mostly it's butter.
Butter.
That's
sugar,
amazing.
Walnut.
All the stuff that you make is really good. But what about you? What I think I know. What would you say?
What I would eliminate?
Yeah,
Stuffing.
that is so wrong.
No, stuffing is wrong.
No,
Stuffing is disgusting.
how is it? It's like mushy
Ew, bread. Mushy bread. Come
It is
on.
amazing.
No, there's nothing amazing about stuffing.
I think you're wrong.
Every year I try to go without. Every single year. And it's like you're side-eyeing me. Where's my stuffing?
Yes,
And like the best that you get out of me for that is stovetop.
which is like the worst of it, but
Oh,
still,
stuffing
at least
is
there's some
awful.
there.
Even the smell of it,
No,
the look of it, there's nothing good about stuffing.
Okay, but here's the thing. So for leftovers,
Okay.
you take a piece of bread, pop it in the toaster.
Okay.
While it's in the toaster, you're getting your stuff out. So
Okay.
you take the piece of toast and then you put some stuffing on there. Then you put some turkey on that or
Okay.
underneath it. Maybe you put the turkey underneath. I think that's how I do it. So it's toast, turkey, and then you put the stuffing, and then
Okay.
you drizzle gravy. And when I say drizzle, I mean basically just pour gravy on top of it, some extra salt and pepper with a little
Extra
bit of the
salt, pepper.
canned cranberry sauce on the side.
Okay. So let me get this
Oh.
right. You take bread
Yeah.
and you harden it in the toaster
Right.
to put soggy bread
Mushy bread
on top of it
Yeah.
to put gravy to make it all soggy at the end of the day.
Well, it's all going to the same place anyway.
Okay.
Yeah. So
it
yeah.
should go to the same place, the trash can. Okay.
I need a new co-host.
Sorry.
Apply online.
Okay. One more question on
For me?
Thanksgiving. Yeah. What's the strangest thing you've ever eaten
Oh.
at Thanksgiving? Do you have one?
I don't think I have one. Like Thanksgiving was always pretty traditional in my house.
Okay.
So I mean, like some people might think it's become more mainstream. We grew up on like the deep fried Cajun turkey where you inject it
yeah,
and do that.
Yeah.
So I don't think it's strange anymore.
No.
But years ago, when we're from the South originally, so
Yeah.
I think years ago people thought that was odd.
Well,
but
when we first started dating, and you're like, we're gonna have deep fried turkey. I'm like,
Yeah.
what? We're going to the what?
That's become more mainstream now, though. So it's
good.
not strange now. It's amazing.
Yeah. Cool. All right. Well, how about you guys? Can you tell
us?
Wait,
you didn't tell us what yours was.
Oh.
What's the strangest thing you've ever had at Thanksgiving?
Okay. So we had...
I'm really curious. I do not know what she's about to say.
Okay. So growing up, we would have these family members come over every year. And I love them dearly. They've passed on now, but I love them dearly. But they would bring yams. That was their dish to bring. But she would take an orange, hollow it out, fill the orange with it, and then put marshmallows and stuff on top. So it actually
like an orange peel?
Yeah, like an orange peel. And so it kind of looks fun. Like, this is way before the days of Pinterest, right? Like, it looked cute and fun. So every time you think, oh, that's going to be good. But it was like she forgot to put like ingredients in there.
That's disturbing.
It was very bitter.
And this was like a regular thing. It wasn't like one year she messed up and it was bad.
Single year. And I come from a very strict British family where you eat what people bring. Like, you do it. But even my mom and grandma would look at me and they're like, just put it on my plate. And they would let me hide it because it was so bad. Yikes. It was so bad. So yeah, that's kind of strange. But what about you? Put in the comments below the strangest thing that you've had on Thanksgiving, because I'm very curious what other people do.
If you're listening to this on one of your podcast recordings, go to the Facebook page. There's a video that will be posted of this, and under there is where the conversations happen. So join us there. Tell us what's the strangest thing you have ever had. See if you can freak us out. That's pretty gross, though. Yeah. It was gross. I mean, they kind of looked cute, but we knew. Don't eat those. Don't eat the cute orange-covered yam stuff.
Okay, so since we're coming up on Thanksgiving, let's talk about gratitude, shall we?
Let's do it.
Okay.
So last year at Grace Valley Church, where I pastor, and you pastor's wife.
Yes, pastor's wife.
Last year, I preached a sermon series on gratitude, and the first two parts of the sermon series were about the gospel.
Yeah.
Because I had this thesis, and so I'm gonna read it to you, kind of the main point of what the object of gratitude was. So here's what I said. I said, gratitude comes when we recognize the depths of our sin in comparison with the measure of His grace.
That's so good.
Gratitude comes when we recognize the depths of our sin in comparison with the measure of His grace. So here's what I meant by that.
Okay.
We're all sinners, and we all deserve judgment, right?
Yeah.
Like the Bible says, for all have sinned and come short of the glory of God. Like all of us deserve the penalty of sin, which is death, separation from God. Romans 3:23, Romans 6:23, Romans 5. I mean, there's just all throughout the book of Romans, we're learning that we could not fulfill the law and that we all deserve eternal condemnation. And so when we recognize the depths of our sin and the fact that we absolutely righteously deserve judgment, that's step number one to gratitude. But the next piece of that, gratitude comes when we recognize the depths of our sin in comparison with the measure of His grace. So that what we're talking about is the fact that we've been redeemed by the grace of Jesus. Those of us that know and follow Christ have recognized that while we were sinners, Christ died on our behalf. He died for us. And because of His sacrifice, He's freed us from our sins. He's the one that has made us righteous. And so where I once deserved condemnation, I now know that I can spend an eternity with Christ in heaven. Mm-hmm. And so when I recognize what I deserved and what I ultimately get as a believer, it's amazing. And from that is birthed this expression of gratitude. The fact that I didn't deserve it. I can't earn my salvation. I don't deserve my salvation. But Christ in His love and mercy has chosen to redeem me. And that is astounding.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. So our theme verse for today is 1 Thessalonians 5:18.
It's hard to say.
It is.
1 Thessalonians 5:18. It says this: give thanks in all circumstances, for this is the will of God in Christ Jesus for you. Give thanks in all circumstances. So we want to talk about that a little bit today.
Okay. So you have a list of truths for us to consider.
Yeah. I'm a pastor, so I have 3 of them.
You do. All right. So let's get into those. The first one. We can be grateful because we know that everything happens for a reason.
Yeah, everything happens for a reason. So sometimes life is going to go the way we want it to go. Mm-hmm. Sometimes the bank account is going to be full. Sometimes the children are going to be healthy. The grades are going to be good. The job is advancing. Sometimes that's what it's going to be like. Right. Other times things are going to be tough.
Yeah.
Sometimes the payment is going to be due and you don't know how you're going to pay it. Sometimes the report from the doctor is not good. Sometimes the grades from the kids are really, really bad. And so there are times where you look at your circumstances and it's easy to think there is no way that I can be grateful this year because nothing in my life is going right.
Yeah.
But the Bible teaches us that in everything, in all things, we can give thanks. And here's what's interesting. And this is a little bit of a game of semantics, but it says in all things, not for all things. Now, why it's kind of a game of semantics is if I'm thankful in it, I should be thankful for it. Right. But it helps my brain at least to go that in these circumstances, it's something that I can still be grateful for because God is allowing this. So God's allowing me to go through whatever I'm going through for a purpose. I like the way Dr. David Jeremiah says it. I wrote it down here. It says, no matter what our circumstances, we can find a reason to be thankful. Now, we may not be able to find a circumstance that we're just like, man, I'm thankful that I got diagnosed with cancer. I've heard of, just in the last year, we were talking in the last year, 3 young adults that lost their spouse to a tragic injury or accident, or perhaps it was cancer or some other health-related issue. I look at that and I think, how is it possible at Thanksgiving for them to be grateful? But in all of the circumstances that we go through, there is still a way for us to be grateful. So in everything, we can find a way to be grateful.
You know who this reminds me of?
Who's that?
Our friend Rochelle.
Oh, Rochelle is one of the strongest people I've ever known.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. Oh. Remember the dinner we had?
Yes.
That's something I reference in my mind often when it comes to this time of year.
Yep.
She told us at dinner one time, she looked at me, and I was young in the ministry at the time, and she looked at me and she said, Matt, if I could go back and do it all over again, if I needed to go back and do it all over again, she looked at me and she said, I would do it in a heartbeat.
Now, she had cancer, right?
Right.
Yeah.
She had breast cancer.
Yeah.
And it was scary, and she had a lot of treatment, and she has like 4 or 5 kids?
No, she has like
10
5.
or 12 kids? No, she has several kids.
Yeah.
I think all of them were home at the time.
Yeah.
None of them were old enough.
They're all at home in school, and her husband traveled a lot for his work, and
she was going through this health scare.
Yeah.
And when she had kind of come out of it and the cancer was in recession, she looked at us and she said, she's like, I would do it all over again if I needed to. And I couldn't understand it.
We just kind of looked at each other like, wait, what?
Yeah. And she told us this. She said, what God did for our family and in our family was so worth the difficulties that we went through. And so in a difficult trial, she found some way to be grateful. Yeah. And it absolutely blew my mind. It's a verse that I go to oftentimes is Romans. We often think of Romans chapter 8, verse 28, where it says, and we know that for those who love God, all things work together for good, for those who are called according to his purpose. And we stop there and we go, man, everything's going to work out okay.
Right.
And most people think what? They think it's going to work out where I'm going to end up with enough money, or they're going to get better. So then I have this question. If that's the case, then how come you don't always end up with the money? Right. And how come they don't always get better? Right. How come you still lose that loved one sometimes? Right. How come the kids' grades don't improve? If that's really true, that all things work together for good, and we think that that's what's good, why doesn't it work out?
Right.
But then when you read verse 29, it goes on, it says, for those whom he foreknew, he also predestined to be conformed to the image of his Son. Mm. You see, God is at work in our lives to conform us into the image of Jesus, his Son, so that we can be like Jesus. And so when you go through that difficult circumstance, and this is why we talk about this idea of the fact that everything is for a purpose and that we can be grateful because we know that everything has a purpose, it's because of the simple fact that God is working everything out to conform us into the image of his Son.
Yeah, that's so comforting to know that.
Absolutely.
As believers, we need to know that having gratitude is not the same thing as giving gratitude.
Yeah, Tim Keller said it this way. He says, it's one thing to be grateful. It's another thing to give thanks. Okay. Gratitude is what you feel. Thanksgiving is what you do. And I love that because having gratitude is not the same as expressing or giving gratitude. In all things, give thanks. Give thanks is what we would refer to grammatically as a present imperative, which calls for this to be a habitual action, something that we're constantly in the attitude of giving thanks. So it's not enough for us just to look at our circumstances and say that, oh, okay, on the inside, well, I guess I have to be grateful. Yeah. Like, I guess I just got this bad diagnosis. All right. And on the inside, I'm thankful. It says that I actually need to express gratitude. One thing I know about your mom is she was very particular with you growing up. If somebody gave you a gift, what did you have to do?
Write a note.
You had to write a thank you note.
Yeah.
Right? Did you ever get away with that?
No.
I remember our wedding. Remember that?
Yes.
What happened at our wedding? Like, we get all these gifts, and she was like on us, which was good. Yeah. Like, have you written the thank you notes yet? Because we
wrote so many thank you notes. We actually wrote one to somebody who didn't give us a gift, and I didn't realize it.
We did?
Yes.
I do not remember that.
Yeah, something had happened with our cards, and they gotten taken off the gifts so that they would be given to us in case that there was cash in there for our honeymoon. And so we kind of didn't know what cards went to what gifts, and so I just got all the cards.
Yeah.
And I wrote thank you notes, and my mom's friend came to her and said, it was really sweet that she wrote me a note, but we didn't get her a gift.
Well, then you shouldn't have come to the wedding. No, I'm just kidding.
Oh, no.
I'm kidding. No, it was I had really nice groomsmen that were trying to help, and they wanted to make sure we got every dollar that we could. So they went around to all the gifts and pulled the cards off and stuck them in the card box. Well,
so we didn't know who gave
we
us
had
what.
no idea some of the gifts who they were. Yeah. So if you didn't, like, if you got a generic card from us and thought, man, they thanked me for the gift. That's why, because we don't know what you gave us.
I was really thankful, though. Like, it was from a genuine thankful
And if you
heart.
want us to know what you gave us, feel free to let us know. Contact us, direct message us or something.
If you remember.
If you remember. We'd love to know. It's been almost 15 years now, but we would still love to know. But that idea was not just we could have, and we were grateful. We had a sense of gratitude, but that's not the same as expressing gratitude. And so what we need to understand as a believer is that God says in all things to give thanks. Don't just, not in all things be grateful, but in everything give thanks. A.W. Tozer said it like this. He says, gratitude is an offering precious in the sight of God, and it is one of the poorest of us. It is one that the poorest of us can make and not be poorer, but richer for having made it. Since I stuttered and stumbled, I'm going to say that again. Gratitude is an offering precious in the sight of God, and it is one that the poorest of us can make and be not poorer for, but richer for having made it. I love that concept, that it's not too expensive for anybody to show gratitude. No. Nope. Every one of us can do it.
Yep.
So that's number 2.
Yeah. All right. Number 3. I love this. For believers, gratitude is not optional.
Gratitude is not optional. 1 Thessalonians 5:18 says this. It clearly states that it is the will of God. It's God's plan for us.
So does that mean God demands it?
Not exactly. Not in the sense that you might think. In fact, if you look at the word will, or like the will of God, it's kind of defined this way. It's an inclination of pleasure towards that which is liked, or that which pleases and creates joy. In other words, give thanks to the desire and pleasure of God. In other words, he wants it. He desires to hear from us. So when we're going through a difficult circumstance, when we're going through a trial, when we're going through a circumstance that is painful or hurtful, he still desires to hear from us. And that's what's so amazing about God, is he is constantly in this place where he wants to hear from you. He wants to know that you understand that what you're going through is, back to what we talked about before, is for your own good.
Okay, so this kind of makes me think of Paul and Silas in prison.
That's a phenomenal illustration.
Yeah.
Because here's 2 guys that are in prison, and honestly, like, we look at prison today in a way totally different than what it would have been like for them. Paul and Silas would have been likely in kind of a dungeon or a cave that would have been moist and damp, and there would have been sickness and illness, and they likely would have been in stocks or chains or something, and it would have been a miserable, terrible environment for them to be in. But we read in the book of Acts that when they were in prison, what did they do? They sang praises to God. They were expressing praise to God, which is a form of gratitude in and of itself. So it wasn't their circumstances.
Right.
Here's the thing, Christy. Too many of us are grateful when our circumstances warrant it, right? Yeah. So like at our wedding, it was easy to write thank you notes because people gave us thank you cards.
Right.
But at times where we've been criticized, at times where we've been yelled at or abused or kicked out or fired or lost a job or those kind of things, when you and I have gone through things like that, it's harder to see the potential for gratitude in that.
Oh, it's so hard.
because I can look back on a time where I lost a job and it was unfair and I don't think it was right. And I talked to some people afterwards that were involved and they helped me understand some of this. And I look back and at the time, it was devastating.
It was devastating.
But now I look at it and I realize what God was doing and what he was doing to work in our lives.
Yeah.
And I'm grateful now for it.
Right.
And I hope, it's been years now, I hope I was grateful in that moment. Because God's looking for us to be grateful in all things and not to attach our gratitude to our circumstances.
Absolutely.
Which ties us back to the beginning, which is that because of, if we understand the depths of our sin, with the goodness of his grace, that's where gratitude comes from, not from our circumstances.
Yeah. And I think if we can keep that in the forefront of our minds, because in that moment, I don't know that I can go back and say I was grateful in that moment. I think I've learned from then to focus on that, but keeping that simple thought that it's our sin that allows us to see God's grace is so good.
And that's the thing. If we don't realize how big of a sinner we are, we don't recognize how huge and significant his grace is. It's kind of, I always liken it to if you have a mortgage and you have 6 months left to pay on that mortgage. And let's say, we'll make the math easy. Let's say that you have $1,000 a month mortgage. So you've got $6,000 left. And somebody comes along and says, I'm going to pay the rest of your mortgage. You're grateful. Absolutely. No doubt about it. You're grateful. But if you walk into the escrow company and you're getting ready to sign the loan documents, and it's that day you walk in and you're looking at a house, let's say that it's a $200,000 house that you're getting ready to sign the papers for, and somebody walks in and they say, hey, I'm going to write a check for $200,000 right now, and I'm going to pay all the taxes for the rest of your life. You'll never pay for repair. You'll never pay to fix it up. You won't have to pay for any, if it has to do with your house, all of that is being taken care of. How do you think you'd feel?
Amazing.
If anyone wants to test that with us, you're welcome to pay our mortgage, and we'll just find out for sure. But I can only imagine that the greater the debt, the greater the rejoicing.
Yeah, absolutely. That is a great illustration.
So as believers, it's our gratitude isn't attached to our circumstances. And I think that's the key that I want people to understand. Your gratitude cannot be attached to your circumstances, because your circumstances at times are going to stink. There's a family that has for years attended my dad's church, and when their son at Thanksgiving was coming home from college, got in a car accident and was killed. And I can imagine that every year at Thanksgiving, it would be an easy time for them to just go into a depression. And I don't know, I've been moved away, so I'm not around them, but I would hope that would be something that they can find joy and rejoicing in now in a way that you and I can't understand because we've never experienced it.
Right. Well, that wraps up episode number 2 of the Everyday Christian
We're
Podcast.
like professionals now.
Yes,
because we've done 2 episodes.
We've done 2.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's probably all downhill from here.
Yeah.
Because
don't say that.
We're like pros.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Next week, we are going to hear an amazing conversation with you and Jenny Lohman on prayer, right?
It's amazing.
Yeah.
Like I'm so excited. I almost hesitated, honestly, to put it this early in our podcasts because I kind of want to maybe build up a little bit of an audience first. But then I thought, it's so good.
Yeah.
This is something I'm hoping people will share with everyone because it's amazing. I'm not going to give you any information about it, but next week you're going to want to tune in.
So it can literally be a life-changing experience.
It should be. Yeah, it should be. Cool. I have never been so convicted about my own personal prayer life in the moment while we were recording it, but then also for the weeks following it, it has just stuck with me and been something that challenged me.
That's great.
Yeah, it is incredible.
Awesome. That's the point, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's cool. Well, if you are listening to this podcast, would you do us a huge favor and rate and review it for us? You can go over to Facebook, and that just helps us get the word out. So
yeah, but the rate and review is something we want you to do on like Apple iTunes and the Apple Podcasts, those kind of things as well. Somehow with their algorithms and stuff, obviously the more that it gets rated and reviewed, the better it is. We're not even asking you to give us a great review. We just want you to be honest, and hopefully it's a great review. But just having some feedback on there would be super helpful. But then with Facebook, what we really want people to do is if you had to listen to this on your drive, when you get home or you get a chance, you pull out your phone or something, the audio that you're listening to is also video, which is on our Facebook page. And that's where we're going to kind of continue the conversation. If you have questions or thoughts, even if you have them for the person who did this, we're going to ask them to engage with you. So if you have questions for the different people that we have conversations with, they'll jump in there. So join the conversation there.
Yeah, that's so great that you guys can just reach out to those people, because I often have questions like that, So, all right. Well, be sure to check us out on social media, and especially at everydaychristiannetwork.com. And we'll see you next time.
Bye, guys.